The morning light filtered through the lace curtains in Eleanor Shaw's kitchen, soft and golden, like a memory trying to find its way back. She stood by the window, one hand resting on the worn oak counter, the other gripping the edge of the sink just a little too tightly. Outside, her garden was beginning to blush, with early spring daffodils breaking through the soil like they hadn't heard the news. Inside, the silence was too perfect, too rehearsed. Eleanor used to love this time of day, the stillness before the world got loud. She'd sip coffee out of a chipped mug, the one her husband had bought at a roadside diner on their honeymoon, and listen to birds fight over seeds on the porch rail. But this morning, even the birds seemed unsure if they should be here. The coffee had gone cold hours ago. She hadn't touched it since the call. "Just a quick checkup, Mom," her daughter-in-law Rachel had said over the phone, voice syrupy sweet. "We want to make sure you're okay after your little tumble." That was what they called it. Now the tumble, like she had tripped on a rug and not landed in a hospital bed with bruises blooming across her ribs. It wasn't the fall that hurt. Not really. It was what came after. She'd barely been conscious when she heard her son's voice low and clipped outside the curtain. "If she can't handle the house anymore, we need to talk about options. It's a lot of space just sitting there. And honestly, the market's high right now." Rachel had agreed, too quickly. "She could move in with us for a bit," she'd said, "but only if we clear the back room first. And if she's really not remembering things, maybe we need to start the paperwork." The paperwork. Eleanor hadn't asked what that meant. She didn't need to. She'd taught literature for 32 years. She knew how to read between lines. The moment she heard them speak like that while she was still breathing, still awake, something shifted inside her. Not anger, not grief, something colder. A decision. That night, she looked at her reflection in the hospital bathroom mirror. The face staring back was thinner than she remembered, but the eyes were the same. Steady. Watchful. Knowing. "They think I'm gone," she whispered. And that was when the idea arrived, not fully formed, but sharp at the edges. Let them believe it. The next morning, Rachel had brought flowers. Too bright, too many. She fluffed Eleanor's pillows, rearranged the bedside table, and asked in a voice 3 octaves too high, "Do you know what day it is, Mom?" Eleanor blinked slowly, let her lips part slightly. "Wednesday," she guessed, voice unsure. Rachel smiled. "It's Sunday." But close enough. She turned to the nurse with a wink as if the answer confirmed something she'd already decided. Eleanor turned her face toward the window and said nothing. Back home, things changed. Not all at once, but subtly, intentionally. Her son, Nathan, installed safety rails in the bathroom, which she appreciated, and then added cameras to the living room and hallway, which she didn't. Rachel began labeling the pantry shelves, the dresser drawers, even the TV remote. "It's just to help Mom," she chirped, "in case you get confused." Eleanor nodded, smiled faintly. She began answering questions just a second too late, letting her sentences trail off, pausing in front of cabinets as if unsure why she'd opened them. It wasn't hard. People believed what they wanted to see, and what they wanted to see was a woman slipping. But Eleanor wasn't slipping. She was watching. The only person who knew the truth was her neighbor, Irene. Irene had been her friend for nearly 40 years since their kids were still in diapers, and they'd shared casseroles and lost dogs and whispered fights with husbands over fence posts and PTA meetings. Now they shared a code. "I need to know what they see when they look at me," Eleanor had said one afternoon, staring into her coffee like it held the answer. "They see a way out," Irene had said quietly. "They see a house they didn't earn, a future they didn't build." Eleanor had nodded. "Then I need to let them keep looking until I decide what they've really earned." It was a Tuesday when the first line was crossed. Eleanor was in the study, her favorite room, the one lined with books and memories and old journals, when she heard Rachel's voice on speakerphone, clear from the kitchen. "I talked to the estate planner. We can move forward if we can demonstrate mental incompetence. I've got the doctor's card. We just need to make sure she flubs the next check-in, something that'll look convincing." Nathan didn't respond right away. Then softly, "She's still my mother." Rachel's voice didn't waver, and she still has assets in her name. That doesn't make her capable. Eleanor exhaled, quietly, deeply. She didn't cry. She'd already done that part. Instead, she opened the bottom drawer of her desk and pulled out the small voice recorder Jonathan had given her before he passed. For when memory plays tricks, he'd joked, "Yours or theirs?" She smiled. It still worked. That night, Eleanor sat at the edge of her bed, listening to the steady click of the recorder's red light. She thought of Jonathan. He'd built this house with his own hands, piece by piece, paycheck by paycheck. She remembered the year he dug the garden with a rented backhoe, and calloused palms how he'd fallen asleep on the porch with dirt in his hair and pride in his smile. He hadn't left her a fortune, but he had left her this. Their home, their story. And she would not let it be rewritten by greed dressed up as concern. She pressed her palm against the wall beside her and whispered, "I'm still here." Then she turned off the light and let the silence do the talking. It started with cookies. Oatmeal raisin Rachel's signature, dry and crumbling sweet in a way that tried too hard. She brought them over in a Tupperware container with a bright label that read, "Tuesday treats," even though it was Thursday. "Just keeping the days straight for you, Mom," she chirped, sliding the container onto the kitchen counter like she owned the marble it sat on. Eleanor gave her a slow, bemused smile, letting her eyes drift to the label. "Oh," she murmured, "is it Tuesday already?" Rachel laughed too loud, not quite but close. They were always close lately. Close to decisions, close to signing things, close to erasing her before she'd gone anywhere at all. The day before, Rachel had accidentally left her iPad open on the kitchen table. Eleanor hadn't touched it, she didn't need to. The screen was frozen on an email titled, "Preparing Documentation for Cognitive Decline Next Steps." Below that, a message from a lawyer if there are recent incidents of confusion or forgetfulness, even anecdotal, that helps. Anything recorded or witnessed by a third party is useful. Rachel's reply, "Plenty of material. She asked me today if her husband was still alive. He's been gone 12 years. A lie. A casual, efficient lie. Eleanor hadn't asked that, not even close. But that was the brilliance of what Rachel was doing. Not malicious, just plausible. Just enough truth to get the door cracked open. And then she'd kick it down. That night, Eleanor stood in the hallway staring at the small black lens nestled in the corner above the coat rack. They'd said it was for safety, that it was common now, that they just wanted to check in. She tilted her head and smiled gently at the lens. Then she walked into the living room and moved the vase by 2 inches, on purpose, slowly. Then 5 minutes later, she moved it back. The next morning, Nathan asked gently over breakfast, "Did you move the vase last night, Mom?" She blinked. "What vase?" He hesitated, then smiled nervous. "Nothing. Never mind." Her performance was subtle and exhausting. She let herself forget things, the name of the neighbor's cat, the way to turn on the ceiling fan. She repeated stories twice, sometimes thrice, pausing mid-sentence as if unsure what came next. But she never forgot where Rachel kept her estate notes, or which cabinet housed the wine Rachel drank after everyone else was asleep, or the password Nathan used for his email, still the same since high school baseball 7. She remembered what mattered. And what mattered most came one rainy afternoon in the form of a child's whisper. Her grandson Theo padded into the kitchen in socks too long for his feet dragging across the tile like little ghosts. He was 9 all knees and questioned still in that innocent place where the world was good unless told otherwise. He climbed onto the stool next to her, grabbed a cookie and said through a mouthful of crumbs, "Mom says you're sick." Eleanor didn't flinch. "Oh." He nodded serious. "She says you don't always remember, that sometimes you say weird things." "I see," Eleanor said softly, brushing crumbs from his cheek. "Do you think I'm sick?" Theo squinted at her, chewing. "No, you just talk slower now." She smiled. "That's not sickness, sweetheart. That's just thinking carefully." He nodded again, then frowned. "But Mom said if you get worse, you'll have to go live in a place with nurses." Eleanor felt something tighten in her chest. She reached for his hand and squeezed gently. "Do you want me to go away?" she asked, eyes locked on his. He looked alarmed. "No, I like coming here. You let me play with the typewriter, and you have the best peanut butter." She laughed a soft thing. "Then that's all I need to know." Later that night, Eleanor sat at the desk in the study, her sacred place, and opened Jonathan's old toolbox. Inside, among rusted screws and a bent tape measure, was a flash drive. She had used it years ago to save letters and lesson plans. Now it had a new purpose. She transferred every voice recording she'd made so far onto the drive, labeled each file with the date and time. She kept a handwritten log in the back of her recipe book, right between the biscuit and chili pages. No one ever looked there. She paused after transferring the latest file, the one from 3 days ago. Rachel. She didn't even remember what day her husband died. If that's not a sign, I don't know what is. Nathan, do you think we should wait until after Theo's birthday? Rachel, she probably won't remember it anyway. Click, end. Eleanor stared at the screen for a long time. Then she picked up a pen and wrote a single line in her log, May 12th. The moment I stopped hoping for grace. The next day, Rachel brought in an independent assessor, a woman named Paula with a clipboard and a tight smile. She's just here to ask a few questions, Rachel said lightly, arranging flowers that didn't need arranging. Nothing formal. Paula sat across from Eleanor and the living room legs crossed neatly pen-poised. Eleanor, I'm going to say 3 words. I want you to remember them, okay? Eleanor nodded, blank and mild. Apple, table, penny. She repeated them back slightly out of order, on purpose. Table, apple, penny. Paula smiled, wrote something down. Rachel offered cookies. She's having more of those moments lately, she said. Just little slips. Paula nodded as if that meant anything. She moved on. What season is it? Spring, Eleanor said. No, wait, fall. Paula looked up. Eleanor blinked. Sorry, she said, I saw the leaves moving earlier. I got turned around. Rachel gave a sympathetic laugh. It happens. The assessment ended 10 minutes later. Paula left with her clipboard. Rachel kissed Eleanor on the cheek and said, You did great. And Eleanor smiled the same soft smile she'd worn the day she buried Jonathan, the one that meant, You don't know what I'm carrying, but I do. That night, Eleanor opened the small wooden box in the back of her closet. Inside was a photograph her wedding day and a letter Jonathan had written her for their 25th anniversary. If life ever turns quiet and strange, if you ever find yourself doubting what's real, remember this. You have always been the strongest woman I know. Let the silence speak when your words are not enough. She folded the letter gently, slid it back into its envelope, and whispered into the dark. Let them think I'm fading. Then louder. I'm not going anywhere. It began with a slip of the tongue. Not hers, theirs. Rachel had grown too comfortable, too confident. She spoke in whispers around Eleanor, but they were whispers for show, like a magician's sleight of hand, more about performance than caution. She thought Eleanor wouldn't hear, but Eleanor had learned to hear the spaces between words. She'd spent her life teaching Shakespeare and Morrison. She knew how truth crouched behind tone. And now she had something better than memory. She had proof. It happened on a Sunday around the time the sky outside went lavender and gold. Eleanor had asked to lie down. Just tired, she murmured and left the living room slowly as expected. She waited 3 minutes, then crept back silently, hiding just beyond the archway. The recorder was already in place, tucked beneath the orchid vase that Rachel insisted on keeping, even though it was always dying. Nathan was on the couch tie, loosened forehead in hand. I don't know, Rach. She seemed sharper this morning. Rachel didn't pause. She's lucid in moments. That doesn't mean she's stable. You said the doctor confirmed. I said we were close. She doesn't have to fail a test if we create enough of a pattern. Think long term. A pause. Then Rachel lower. It's not just the house, Nate. It's her account. You know how much is sitting there untouched. Your name's not even on it. If something happens, Nathan echoed. I want to know we did the right thing. She's losing it. Rachel snapped the polish, slipping. The other day, she asked if the school still needed volunteers. She retired 9 years ago. Eleanor felt the cold roll down her spine. She had asked that, but not out of confusion. She'd asked it because she missed the work, the students, the purpose. Not because she didn't know the year. That night, Eleanor played back the recording, twice. Then saved it onto the flash drive. Labeled it with quiet precision. 3A, pattern creation to greed justification. She kept her hand steady as she typed, though her breath trembled. This wasn't just betrayal, this was design. The next day, Eleanor sat in the kitchen folding towels as Rachel packed Theo's lunch. Theo sat at the table sketching in his notebook, crayon clutched in a tight fist tongue poking out in concentration. "I'm drawing our house," he said proudly. Eleanor leaned closer. "It's beautiful." He grinned, showing the gap where his front tooth used to be. "See the big tree? That's where you said the squirrels dance." She laughed. "They do when no one's watching." He flipped to a second page. "This one's the bedroom. See, there's the bookshelf. And you?" Eleanor looked. A small stick figure with white hair stood beside a brown rectangle. "And that's you lying in bed," he said. "Because Mommy says you'll be sleeping more soon." Eleanor blinked. "Oh, yeah," he said, serious. "She told Daddy that soon you'll be resting a lot, so I should get used to seeing you lie down more." Eleanor folded the towel in half again, precisely, deliberately. Did she say why? Theo shook his head. "Just said you're tired. Old people get tired." Eleanor excused herself a few minutes later and stepped outside to the back porch. The cold air bit her cheeks, but it helped her breathe. She sat on the bench Jonathan had built, the one with the chipped armrest and the initials carved underneath E+J 1987. She placed the drawing in her lap. A child's innocent sketch of a home, a bed, a grandmother they were already painting into the walls like a fading memory. She closed her eyes, pressed her fingers to her lips, and whispered, "Not yet." Later that evening, while Rachel took a call in the bedroom and Nathan was on his laptop, Eleanor pulled Theo aside gently. "Sweetheart," she said, kneeling down to his eye level, "can you keep a very special secret for Grandma?" He nodded, eyes wide with excitement. "I have a surprise for you, but you can't tell anyone until I say so, promise." He raised a hand. "I pinky swear." She handed him a small key brass, worn, and whispered, "Hide this in your backpack. Not your drawer, not your closet, your backpack." He blinked. "What's it for?" "It opens something very important, something that belongs to you, but only later, only when I say." He nodded seriously. "Okay." She smiled, kissed his forehead. "Good boy." That night, Eleanor slipped back into her room and opened the small floor safe behind the armoire. She pulled out the new draft of her will, the one Rachel didn't know existed. She added a line in careful cursive. "To Theo, should he come of age with kindness still intact, the house, the orchard, and the letters, he will know what they mean." She locked it away and made a second recording. 3B, contingency transfer of assets conditional. The next morning, Rachel found her standing at the stove. "Mom," she said, puzzled, "are you cooking?" Eleanor turned slowly, spatula in hand. "I thought I'd make pancakes," she said lightly. "Theo likes them." Rachel blinked. "I mean, that's great, but I thought you weren't using the stove anymore." Eleanor looked at her for a beat too long. "Oh," she said softly. "Was I not allowed?" Rachel gave a tight laugh. "No, of course you are. It's just a surprise." Eleanor smiled. "I surprise myself sometimes." She turned back to the stove. Her hand didn't shake. "Not today." There's a certain silence that feels like warning. That morning it arrived wrapped in politeness. Rachel bustled around the kitchen, too cheerful, her voice pitched high like a performer warming up backstage. She laid out fresh towels, lit a vanilla candle that Eleanor hated, and kept checking the time. Eleanor knew something was coming. By 10, it had a name. Dr. Marin, Rachel announced brightly, stepping aside as a woman in a navy blazer entered the room. "She's here to do a little check-in." Eleanor blinked, letting her face go soft. "Check-in." "Just a few questions," Mom Rachel said, touching her shoulder like a nurse in a pharmaceutical ad. "Nothing to stress about." But her eyes said, "Fail this." Dr. Marin was young, polished, efficient. She greeted Eleanor with a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes and opened a sleek leather folder. "I understand you've had a few falls, Mrs. Shaw." Eleanor nodded slowly. "Floors are tricky things." Dr. Marin chuckled, the sound of someone who didn't believe in jokes. She pulled out a pen. "We're just going to walk through a quick cognitive evaluation. Nothing formal, nothing binding, just for records." Eleanor glanced toward the hallway where one of the cameras was hidden. She nodded again. "Of course." The test began. "What year is it?" Eleanor paused. 2023, she said. "Month." "March." "President." "Still the one everyone argues about." Dr. Marin raised a brow but smiled. "Can you count backwards from 100 by sevens?" Eleanor blinked. "Like 193, 86. Keep going. Eleanor stumbled, then corrected herself. Rachel, seated nearby with her tea, sipped loudly. Dr. Marin jotted notes. Now I'm going to read you a short story, the doctor continued. Then I'll ask you to tell me what you remember. Eleanor listened carefully. A woman goes to the store. She buys milk, eggs, bread. She sees a neighbor. She forgets to buy the butter. She goes home. What do you remember? Eleanor looked at her eyes hazy. A woman went to the store. Yes, she forgot something. Yes, do you remember what? Eleanor furrowed her brow, then shook her head faintly. No, I'm sorry. Dr. Marin nodded, hiding her satisfaction with professional neutrality. Rachel smiled over her teacup, but Eleanor wasn't done. As Dr. Marin packed up, Eleanor leaned slightly forward. I used to be a teacher, you know? I heard the doctor replied politely. Literature, long time, 32 years. That's wonderful. Eleanor tilted her head. Would you mind just one question for me? Dr. Marin blinked. Of course. Eleanor looked her in the eye. Calm, direct. In The Great Gatsby, what does the green light represent? Dr. Marin stared. Rachel frowned. I'm sorry, the doctor said, flustered. I didn't actually read that one. Eleanor's smile was faint, but her eyes gleamed. I remember. Later that afternoon, Eleanor sat in the study, replaying the hidden audio from the visit. She wrote in her journal, 4A, doctor assessment inconclusive. Use question as control, still underestimated. Nathan knocked gently on her door that evening. Mom. She looked up. Yes. Can I ask you something? She nodded. He stepped inside. He looked tired. Not like a man scheming, like a man trying not to drown. I need to know. Do you know what's going on? Eleanor met his eyes. With what? He hesitated. With all of this. Rachel's worried. She thinks you're declining. But I don't know anymore. Do you want to know? Eleanor asked softly. Or do you just want peace? Nathan blinked. I want the truth. Eleanor slowly walked to her bookshelf and pulled out a copy of King Lear. She flipped it open, found the passage by instinct. She hath tied sharp-toothed unkindness like a vulture. Here she quoted, pressing a hand to her heart. I can scarce speak to thee. Nathan's breath caught. He remembered. That's from... Yes. She closed the book. Does that sound like someone who doesn't know what year it is? He said nothing. She didn't press. That night, Eleanor received a message on her old landline, the one Rachel forgot existed. It was from Irene. I saw Rachel talking to that lawyer again. The same one from last fall. He left with papers. Eleanor didn't speak. She simply pressed record. 4B, external validation legal consultation confirmed. The game was accelerating. Rachel was preparing her final move. But she didn't know Eleanor had already made hers, and the next piece was ready. It was raining, but Irene didn't knock. She never did. Eleanor saw her through the front window, arms bundled with a brown paper bag, and her old blue umbrella flapping in the wind like it had given up. She pushed the door open before Irene reached it. I brought scones, Irene said, water beading on her glasses. And information. Eleanor stepped aside. God bless you. They moved like muscle memory, Irene, setting the bag down, Eleanor boiling the water. A dance 35 years in the making. But this time the air held something sharp. Not fear, something older, protective. They're close, Irene said once the tea was poured. I mean close. Eleanor stirred her honey slowly. How do you know? I saw Rachel at the courthouse last week. She wasn't on jury duty, I checked. She was carrying that big leather folder, the one Nathan gave her for Christmas. Eleanor didn't flinch. And I waited, followed her to the parking lot. She was on the phone, said something about pushing the timeline forward before you get too sharp again. Eleanor smiled faintly. How thoughtful of her. They sat in silence for a moment. The kind women like them had mastered full of noise beneath the hush. I also saw Nathan Irene added. He looked tired, sad even. I think he's beginning to suspect she's moving faster than he meant to. Eleanor nodded. He wants peace, but he doesn't know what peace costs yet. Irene leaned forward, voice low. Do you want to stop them now? Eleanor sipped her tea. No, she said, not yet. Irene didn't argue. She understood the weight of strategy disguised as stillness. Rachel appeared 2 hours later as if summoned by tension in the air. She stopped short when she saw Irene in the kitchen. "Oh," she said, masking her reaction. "Didn't know we had company." "Irene brought scones," Eleanor said pleasantly. "And storm warnings." Rachel blinked. "I'm sorry." "About the rain," Eleanor added. "Nothing else yet." Rachel smiled tightly. "Of course." She placed a manila folder on the kitchen counter. "I also brought something. Just a few forms to look over, Mom." Eleanor turned. "Forms. Nothing urgent," Rachel said too quickly. "Just some standard things. Power of attorney stuff, medical proxies, peace of mind." Eleanor tilted her head. "Yours or mine?" Rachel laughed a note too sharp. "Everyone's." Irene's gaze moved from Rachel to the folder and back again. "Mind if I take a look?" Rachel stiffened. "It's confidential." "I'm family," Irene said coolly, "in the ways that matter." Eleanor watched Rachel's hand grip the folder tighter. "Maybe later," she said with a smile too polished to be real. Rachel left early that evening with barely a goodbye. As the front door shut, Eleanor let out a breath she hadn't realized she was holding. Irene stood. "We need to make copies of that folder." "I already have a plan," Eleanor said, rising. She reached behind a row of antique recipe books and pulled out the flash drive. She handed it to Irene. "Everything I've recorded, every conversation, every whisper, every contradiction." Irene held it like it was made of glass. "What do you want me to do with it?" "Hide it, somewhere I won't think to look. If they ever take me before I'm ready, give it to Dr. Keene." "The lawyer?" "No," Eleanor said. "The one who listens. My old student. The one who said I changed his life because I taught him how to ask why not just how." That night, Eleanor sat in her study and opened her journal. She wrote, 5A, Rachel initiated power documents. Nathan silent, Irene informed. First transfer complete. She paused, then added, "Do not rush. Let their impatience speak louder than my silence." 2 days later, Eleanor forgot to take her vitamins. Rachel found her bottle still full. "Mom, you have to take these," she said, voice sweet but brittle. "They help keep your brain strong." Eleanor blinked. "What brain?" Rachel laughed. "You're funny." Eleanor smiled, "Only when I mean to be." Rachel left the room muttering something about dosage logs and missed calls to the doctor. As her footsteps faded, Eleanor looked up at the hallway camera and winked. There's a strange intimacy to betrayal. It doesn't just wound, it exposes. It leaves fingerprints in places you didn't know were private. And it always leaves a paper trail. Eleanor found Rachel's trail by accident, or maybe fate. It was a Monday. Rachel was running late for a real estate client. She rushed out with her scarf half tied and her laptop still open on the dining table. Eleanor sat quietly in the corner, working on her crosswords, and watched the door close behind her daughter-in-law with a quiet click. 10 seconds later, she rose. The screen was still glowing. Rachel had been logged into her shared drive. Eleanor touched the trackpad gently as if afraid it might bite. What she found made her breath catch. There were folders, dozens of them, some labeled by year 2019, 2020, 2021, others by name Dad's Portfolio Insurance Documents, Eleanor Power Packet. That one made her pause. She clicked. Inside PDFs, spreadsheets, annotated drafts of documents she'd never seen, one labeled POA Final Signature Needed, another Memory Assessment Plan Timeline. There were notes, comments from Rachel in red. Push for signing by end of month, use confusion episode. Ask Dr. Marin to phrase evaluation with ambiguity. Nathan worried, minimize emotional language when discussing move. Her computer is still active, begin transferring banking access before confrontation. Eleanor sat back in her chair. Her hands were steady. Her heartbeat was not. Then she found it. A folder labeled Nathan. She hesitated, then clicked. Emails, dozens, most from Rachel. Some were pleading, some cold, some threatening in the most careful corporate tone. "We need this, Nathan. It's not about being cruel, it's about being realistic. If we wait until she spirals, we lose control. This is our window. Don't forget who's protecting you from the IRS mess. This has to go through." And one reply from Nathan. "I don't want to lose my mother over this. I don't even know who I am around you anymore." That line hit her harder than all the rest. Eleanor whispered aloud as if speaking to the silence. "You're still my son." She moved fast. She plugged in a small USB drive, one she kept hidden in a decorative tea tin Rachel never dusted, and copied the entire Eleanor Power Packet folder. Then, before logging out, she opened a blank document and wrote a single sentence. "I'm still here, and I remember everything." She left it open, let it simmer, then returned to her crossword and waited. Rachel came back at 12:37 p.m., distracted and muttering about parking meters. She passed Eleanor without a word. 2 minutes later, Mom. Eleanor didn't look up. Rachel's voice was too careful. "Did you touch my laptop?" Eleanor blinked slowly. "Laptop. I think it went to sleep and reopened a weird tab." "Oh." Eleanor tilted her head. "Did it forget what it was doing?" Rachel stared. Eleanor returned to her puzzle. "Happens to the best of us." That night, she met Irene on the bench outside the church near the high school where she used to teach. She handed her the new flash drive and a folded napkin. "I want you to give this to Dr. Keene," she said. "Not yet, but soon." "What changed?" "I found their map," Eleanor said. "Now I can plan the storm." Later that evening, Nathan came to her room. He didn't speak right away. Just sat in the old armchair beside the bookshelf like he used to as a boy when he had nightmares. "I found your college recommendation letters," he said after a long silence. "You kept all of them." Eleanor smiled faintly. "You had good grammar back then." He laughed. It cracked in the middle. "Rachel's not evil," he said finally. "She's just scared. We both are." "That's the worst kind," Eleanor replied softly. "The fear that makes you cruel." He looked at her then, really looked. "Are you losing your memory?" Eleanor met his eyes. "Are you—" He blinked. "What?" "Because I think you've forgotten who you are." He didn't respond, but he didn't argue either. That night, Eleanor added 2 more lines to her journal. 6A, Rachel exposed. Backup secured, Nathan cracking. Regret is a doorway, I will wait to see if he steps through. Eleanor lit a candle before she started. Not for drama, for focus. The house was quiet, save for the occasional hum of the refrigerator and the far-off creak of a floorboard Eleanor hadn't stepped on in hours. She sat at the writing desk in her bedroom, the one Jonathan built for their 15th anniversary. The drawer still stuck slightly on the right side, just enough to remind her it was real. She opened her leather-bound notebook, the one with Jonathan's initials pressed into the corner, and began writing a new will. She didn't need a lawyer, not yet. This was the emotional draft, the one not bound by legality, but by memory. At the top, she wrote, "This is not vengeance, this is clarity." Then she drew 3 columns. Column 1, what they asked for. Column 2, what they deserved. Column 3, what I will give. She started with Nathan, asked for power of attorney, control of the house, partial access to her accounts. Deserved a second chance, but not unquestioned trust. Will give a conditional legacy, one based on character, not blood. Then Rachel asked for everything, deserved nothing. Will give a line in a letter she won't want to read. Brian, her estranged brother, distant, opportunistic, asked for silence, deserved distance. Will give nothing. And finally, Theo. She paused here, longer than with the others. What had he asked for? Only time, only honesty. Deserved a world that would not lie to him. Will give the house, the orchard, the stories, the truth. The next day, Eleanor went to the notary's office with Irene, not the main office, but a satellite branch nestled inside the back of a library. Quiet, private. She filed the documents, a new will, a healthcare directive, and a letter to Dr. Keene. She used a different bank for the foundation she created, one that Rachel didn't even know existed. As they walked back to the car, Irene said, "Feels like a funeral." Eleanor smiled. "It is, but only for a version of me I'm done pretending to be." At home that evening, Rachel was waiting. She was holding the tea tin, the one where Eleanor had hidden the original flash drive. "I was looking for chamomile," Rachel said too calmly. Eleanor blinked. "Did you find peace of mind instead?" Rachel's lips twitched. There was a device inside, a USB. "Where is it now?" "I gave it to someone," Eleanor said, her voice soft as fog. "Someone I trust." Rachel's mask cracked just slightly. "You're playing a dangerous game, Mom." Eleanor smiled, not sweetly this time, not at all. "I'm done playing. Now I'm recording." Rachel's jaw tightened. "You can't." Eleanor stepped forward, gaze steady. "I can, and I did, and I will." because for once I'm not the one forgetting things. You are." Theo found her in the garden the next morning. He had his sketchbook in his hands again and dirt on his knees. He sat next to her on the bench, silent for a while. Then, "Mom says you're mad at her." Eleanor didn't lie. "I'm disappointed," she said gently. "That's different." "Why?" "Because anger passes. Disappointment stays when someone forgets to be kind." Theo nodded, looking down. "I heard her talking to Daddy last night. She said you're pretending." Eleanor looked at him. "What do you think?" He shrugged. "I think you know more than you say." "Why?" "Because you still beat me at cards." They both laughed. Then he pulled something from his sketchbook. A folded note. "She told me not to tell anyone," he whispered. "But I think you should know." Eleanor unfolded the paper. It was a copy of Rachel's timeline. Theo had drawn it clumsily but clearly. Stick figures, arrows, boxes labeled facility and cell house. "I found it on her desk," he said. "I don't want you to go away." Eleanor blinked back something warm and unbearable. "You are the best part of me," she whispered. And then she hugged him like the world might end if she let go. That night, Eleanor made her final journal entry of the week. 7A, will rewritten, paperwork filed. Theo confirmed Rachel's endgame. "I am no longer waiting to be erased. I'm choosing what stays behind." It began with a single misplaced phrase. Eleanor was setting the table for dinner, not dramatically, not deliberately, just one plate at a time when Rachel walked in and froze. "I thought I told you to rest tonight," Rachel said gently. Too gently. Eleanor turned eyes wide. "Rest from what?" Rachel smiled, strained. "You've been confused lately. I thought you'd want to take it easy." Eleanor placed the final fork down with delicate precision. Then ever so softly she replied, "Do confused people alphabetize the spice rack?" Rachel said nothing, but something in her face shifted. Not panic, not yet, but awareness. Something was wrong. Or something was very right. That evening, Rachel cornered Nathan in the hallway, her voice pitched low but urgent. "She's hiding something," she hissed. "You said she was slipping. She's not slipping." Nathan rubbed his eyes. "Maybe we were wrong. Don't get sentimental now." Rachel crossed her arms. "She's poking holes in the story, and I swear she knows about the documents. She keeps saying things that hint, like she's toying with us." "Then stop giving her reasons," Nathan said, and walked away. Rachel stood frozen as if the floor had shifted beneath her heels. The next morning, Eleanor forgot to lock her bedroom door. Inside, Rachel found the writing desk drawer cracked open just enough to tempt her. She rummaged carefully, quietly. She found nothing, because Eleanor had already moved the will, the flash drives, the journal. But she had left something behind a single page. A copy of a poem scrawled in Jonathan's handwriting dated years before his death. "We die when silence steals the words we're too afraid to say." Rachel frowned. It wasn't evidence, but it was a warning. Theo came home from school with a drawing in his hand and a question in his mouth. "Grandma," he asked, "can someone be good but do bad things?" Eleanor looked up from her sewing. "Yes." "Even if they say it's to help?" "Yes." He was quiet for a moment. Then he handed her the drawing. It was of her, standing in front of the house, her arms outstretched. Behind her was a storm-gray scribbles and jagged lines. But she was smiling. "What's this?" she asked gently. "You," he said, "before the storm hits." Eleanor stared at it for a long time, and then finally let herself cry. That night, Nathan approached her. He didn't sit. He just stood at the edge of the living room, hands in pockets, eyes dark. "Rachel wants to move you." Eleanor said nothing. "She has the place picked out, a facility near her mother. It's nice." Still, Eleanor said nothing. Nathan took a breath. "She says it'll make things easier." "For who?" He blinked. "For all of us." Eleanor rose, slowly, gracefully. "Then let me make it easier." She walked to the cabinet, pulled out a small black notebook, and handed it to him. Inside were transcripts, labeled conversations, dates, quotes. Rachel's words captured, his own too. "I was going to wait," Eleanor said. "But since you've chosen a side, I thought you deserved to know which side you're actually on." Nathan flipped through the pages, his hands trembling. "What is this?" "The truth," she said. "Yours, hers, mine." He sat down, hard, and didn't speak again for a long time. Rachel returned late that evening. Eleanor was already in bed, eyes closed, but her breathing was too even to be asleep. She heard the hushed voices in the hallway. Rachel, you told her. Nathan, she already knew. Rachel, you gave her what? Nathan, you lied to me, Rach. Rachel, I protected you. A pause. Then a slap of paper. The notebook, likely. She has this because of you. Silence. Then Eleanor heard Rachel whisper quieter than the storm outside. She's not the woman we thought she was. And for the first time in weeks, Eleanor allowed herself a genuine, full-bodied smile. Later that night, she wrote in her journal, 8A, first crack revealed. Nathan faltering. Rachel afraid. They see me now. Too late to unsee. It was supposed to be just dinner. Roast chicken, green beans, store-bought rolls. Rachel brought wine she couldn't pronounce, and Nathan set the table like it was Sunday in a peaceful family home, not the site of a quiet war. Eleanor knew better. She'd seen Rachel's eyes that morning, sharp, unreadable. She was preparing something. A last move. Maybe legal. Maybe emotional. But Eleanor wasn't afraid, because she had something stronger than fear now. She had clarity. Theo sat across from her at the table, swinging his legs under the chair. He was drawing something on the corner of a paper napkin. Nathan kept glancing her way, unsure of which role he was playing anymore, protector, betrayer, or witness. And Rachel was all performance. She smiled too widely, passed the wine too quickly, laughed too often. Eleanor waited, let the stage build its own tension. Finally, after the plates were cleared and the conversation had shrunk to silence, Rachel stood. I think we should talk, she said lightly. Eleanor nodded. Yes, I believe we should. Rachel blinked just for a second. That wasn't the response she expected. She pulled a folder from her purse and laid it on the table. These are the updated documents we've prepared, nothing binding yet. Just options. Eleanor didn't look at them. Rachel continued, her voice laced with polished concern. We think it's time to make arrangements. A facility. Some professional oversight. It's about peace of mind, really. For whom? Eleanor asked softly. Rachel smiled. For all of us. Eleanor leaned forward, voice still calm. You mean you've decided to move me? Sell the house? Manage the accounts? Rachel faltered. Well, I've heard the conversations, Eleanor interrupted. All of them. Nathan looked up. What? I've heard every word, every plan, every whisper when you thought I was sleeping. When you called me confused, incapable. Rachel's smile cracked. That's not... I have recordings, Eleanor said. She reached beneath the table and placed a small speaker down gently. Black, simple, old, but powerful. I won't play them unless I have to, but I will if you force my hand. Rachel's face paled. Eleanor turned to Nathan. And you... He swallowed. I didn't know how deep she was in. But you signed things, Eleanor said, didn't you? He looked at the floor. I wanted to believe it was helping you, he whispered. No, Eleanor replied, voice like steel covered in silk. You wanted to believe I was too far gone to know better, so you wouldn't have to feel guilty for giving up. Silence. Then Theo spoke. It was quiet, but it cut through the room like thunder. Are you trying to steal Grandma? Rachel turned to him. Sweetheart. Because it feels like you are, he said. Eleanor looked at him gently. It's okay, Theo. I know you're confused. I'm not, he said. You remember things. You remember me. That means you're not broken. Rachel's voice rose in forced calm. We're doing this to protect her. From what Theo snapped. From loving us. From wanting to stay home. Nathan covered his mouth with his hand. Rachel reached toward Theo, but he flinched back. I don't believe you anymore, he said to her. Eleanor stood. This house is mine. This mind is mine. And this life is mine. You don't get to edit that just because it would be more convenient. She turned to Nathan. You have a choice now. You can be the man your father hoped you'd become, or you can stay quiet and lose everything. He met her eyes, and for the first time in years, he didn't look away. Rachel reached for the folder. Eleanor placed her hand over it. Leave it, she said. Rachel's voice dropped. You can't win. I'm not trying to win, Eleanor said. I'm trying to live. That night, the house felt different, like it exhaled with her. Theo crept into her room after bedtime. Can I sleep here tonight? Of course. He curled beside her like he did when he was little before the storm began. You're safe now, Grandma, he whispered. She kissed his hair. "No, sweetheart," she whispered back. "We are." It took less than a week for Rachel to file the petition. Concern for maternal well-being. The document claimed evidence of cognitive decline, emotional instability, and inability to manage affairs. She used words like compassionate oversight and medical necessity, but Eleanor wasn't surprised. Rachel had never been one to retreat quietly. What Rachel hadn't expected, though, was that Eleanor wouldn't retreat either. The hearing was quiet. Just a modest courtroom in the county building, wood paneling, cold air conditioning, and a judge with tired eyes who had heard too many families claim it's for her own good, while eyeing bank accounts behind tears. Rachel showed up in a tailored navy suit and a binder thick with supporting documentation. Nathan came too alone, unshaven, jacket in hand but not worn. Eleanor entered last. She wore gray slacks, a soft blue blouse, and Jonathan's wedding ring around her neck. And she brought 3 things with her: a folder of transcribed conversations, a notarized statement from Dr. Keene, her former student and current physician, and Theo. Rachel spoke first. She performed the role well-concerned daughter-in-law burdened with the emotional weight of caring for someone whose mind was clearly unraveling. She forgets what day it is. She repeats stories. She's fixated on the past. The judge nodded, scribbling notes. Eleanor waited, patiently. Then the judge turned to her. "Mrs. Shaw," he said gently, "are you able to respond?" Eleanor stood. "Your Honor," she said calmly, "I am a retired educator with 32 years of service. I taught literature, rhetoric, and moral philosophy. I can quote Lear and Baldwin and recite the Bill of Rights from memory, if you'd like. But none of that matters if I can't also prove that I've been watching and recording what was never meant for me to hear." She laid the folder on the desk. "These are transcripts. Recordings of conversations between my son, his wife, and others. Conversations where they discuss selling my house without my knowledge, where they reference pushing a diagnosis, where they call me a financial obstacle." The judge raised an eyebrow. Rachel turned red. Then Eleanor held up Dr. Keene's letter. "In this envelope is a signed and sealed statement from my physician, someone who has known me for decades, confirming my cognitive health is intact. The so-called episodes were selectively interpreted moments of exhaustion and grief." Then she took Theo's hand. "And if you still need proof, I'd like to read a note from my grandson." Rachel opened her mouth, but Theo stepped forward. "I wrote it myself," he said to the judge. "I'm 9, not stupid." The judge smiled. "Go ahead, son." Theo cleared his throat and read from the note. "Grandma plays cards with me. She remembers all the rules. She remembers what I liked for lunch 2 weeks ago. She remembers stories about my grandpa. And she always remembers to say, 'I love you' back. That's not broken. That's better than most people." Silence fell. Then the judge looked up. "Mrs. Shaw," he said, "you may be the sharpest witness I've heard all week." The petition was denied. Permanently. Rachel's binder stayed on the table unopened. She left the courtroom in silence. Nathan lingered outside. Eleanor stepped out into the sunlight, pausing beside him. "I'm sorry," he said without looking at her. "I know," she replied. He wiped his eyes. "Is it too late?" Eleanor studied him. "No, but the inheritance is." Then she walked past him, not with bitterness, but with dignity. 2 months later, Rachel moved out. Nathan stayed in town. Quiet. He began volunteering at the community food bank. Eleanor didn't ask questions. Some healing doesn't require words. As for Theo, he came over every Thursday after school. They played cards, ate peanut butter sandwiches, and wrote stories together, wild, wonderful tales of sea monsters and time-traveling cats and secret gardens that never closed. Eleanor created a trust in his name, the Theo Shaw Fund for Curiosity, Character, and Compass. Because someday she knew the world would try to convince him that kindness was weakness. And she wanted her legacy to whisper back, "No, it's the strongest thing there is." On her last journal page, Eleanor wrote, "I chose silence so I could hear the truth. I chose kindness when revenge would have felt better. I chose to remember when they were hoping I'd forget. I chose me."